Malene Richards had always carried a world inside her, one made of colors and shapes that refused to stay still. She was only 5 when her mother gave her her first set of colored pencils. From that day forward, no piece of paper was safe. She transformed every blank space into a universe of her own making. In the small wooden house where she grew up, the walls of her room became a gallery of imagination. Landscapes that didn't exist, faces of strangers from the bus stop, animals she'd only seen in books. The daughter of a cleaning lady and a factory worker who worked alternating shifts, Malene grew up watching her parents return home exhausted. Money was always tight. Sometimes it didn't even last until the end of the month. The empty spots in the fridge told silent stories of sacrifice. "Art doesn't fill your stomach, Maddie," her father would say with the rough voice of a man who knew life's weight. "You need to study something that gives you security." Even when a high school teacher showed her parents Malene's remarkable sketches and spoke of art school scholarships, their answer was always the same: "We can't take risks. She needs a future she can count on." So, Malene chose the safe path. She worked evenings at a diner to fund her business administration degree. Her college notebooks were filled more with doodles than notes, but she pushed through. Every time she passed an art exhibit, a lump formed in her throat. At 23, she landed a job at Tech Future, a rising tech company in a sleek downtown tower. Her office had views of the river. Everything was clean, cold, sterile. Her desk in the finance department was small and orderly. Her job, checking reports, updating spreadsheets, attending meetings where she wore a mask of interest. In those early months, she still carried a notepad. During lunch breaks in the building's garden, she'd sketch the sky, the birds, the passing faces. It was during one of these moments that she met Harold. Harold Jenkins had been the building's janitor for over 20 years. He was in his early 60s, his eyes deeply lined but kind, always on the edge of a smile. His gray uniform was always pressed. One afternoon, Malene felt someone watching her draw. She looked up. "You have the gift," he said, voice hoarse but gentle. That was the beginning of an unlikely friendship. Each lunch, they shared stories. Harold told her about Eleanor, his late wife, an artist who painted in the basement studio of their modest home. Painting wasn't a hobby for her, he said, eyes soft with memory. It was breathing. Malene confided her secret dreams. To him, the folders of drawings hidden away, the ache to create. Harold always listened closely, as if every word mattered. Years passed. 1, then 2, then 5. Tech Future grew. Malene survived layoffs, reorgs, office reshuffles. Her paycheck got bigger, her joy smaller. The time for sketching vanished. Her boss, Victor Mercer, was a man who thrived on control. Public praise was rare. Criticism was currency. Somehow Malene became his favorite target. Perhaps because she never fought back. Perhaps because the quiet gleam in her eyes still hadn't faded entirely. Her desk became a monument to tasks. Sticky notes, deadlines, spreadsheets. The sketchbook was buried in a drawer, forgotten. Harold noticed. He saw her shoulders slump, her smile fade. "Life's too short for regrets, Maddie," he'd say, quietly. Eleanor figured that out too late. She always answered the same. "Some people get to follow dreams, Harold. Others have bills to pay." Then came the rainy Tuesday in March. The finance team buzzed with rumors. Layoffs again. At 10 a.m., Victor called a general meeting. Malene brushed off the dread. She was reliable, never late, never absent. The room was packed. Glass walls exposed them like fish in a tank. Victor walked in, flanked by HR reps. "As you all know, we're undergoing strategic restructuring," he began, voice clipped. "Some positions are no longer aligned with company goals." Then his eyes found hers. "Miss Richards, after a thorough review, we've concluded that your performance does not meet expectations. Your contract is terminated effective today." Silence fell like a guillotine. Maline's face flushed. Her hands shook. She scanned the crowd. No one met her gaze. These were people she had lunched with, laughed with. Now they avoided her like a curse. "You may collect your things," Victor added, already moving on to the next item. Numb, she returned to her desk. A cardboard box was waiting. She packed mechanically. Framed photos, pens, a small plant, and the forgotten sketchbook. Box in arms, she walked down the corridor. Co-workers watched with a mix of pity and relief. Then she saw him. Harold stood at the corner, one hand on his cleaning cart. Their eyes met. She tried to smile, but her lip trembled. He walked over, face set with quiet purpose. In his palm, he held a small, slightly tarnished golden key. "It's time," he said, voice steady. "Time for what?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "To breathe." "Maddie," he replied. "That's what Eleanor used to say." He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. An address, Magnolia Street, number 37. "Eleanor's studio has been waiting for you. Too long, I think." Still stunned, Maline took the key. Years ago, Harold explained, Eleanor's art studio was her sanctuary. When she passed, he couldn't bring himself to sell it. He kept it just as she left it, waiting. A small room beside Harold's house had been empty for a long time. That night, after hours of silent crying in her tiny apartment, Maline drove to the address he had given her. The house was simple, nestled in a quiet suburb, its garden neat and lovingly tended. A wooden plaque read, "Number 37." The key slipped perfectly into the lock. Inside was a room that time had gently paused. Tall windows welcomed in natural light. Easels stood like silent sentinels draped in dusty sheets. Shelves overflowed with forgotten paint pots, brushes stiff with time, jars half filled with colors long dried. Blank canvases lined the walls like possibilities waiting to be noticed. There were rolls of fabric, a sewing machine tucked in the corner. Eleanor, Harold's late wife, had been an artist of many trades. The scent was a mix of dust, oil paint, and memory. In the center of the studio sat a large table, and on it, a letter. "Dear Maline." Eleanor always said this studio held a special kind of magic, that the walls absorbed creativity and returned it, amplified. Since she passed, this space has been silent, waiting. "From the first day I saw you sketching in the garden, I knew Eleanor would have adored you. You carry the same light in your eyes when you create. This space is now yours, not as charity, but as recognition. For your talent, your spirit, the artist you've always been, even when the world tried to convince you otherwise. Life's too short to live someone else's dream." Harold Maline walked through the studio in silence, fingertips brushing over the forgotten surfaces. She could feel it, the energy Harold spoke of. On impulse, she pulled one of the sheets away, revealing an old but sturdy easel. In a drawer, she found a sketch pad and a worn case of charcoal sticks, still usable. She sat, and something inside her stirred. After years of silence, she began to draw. In the months that followed, Maline poured herself into reviving the studio. What had once been abandoned and dusty now pulsed with new life. Every brushstroke felt like breathing again, a return to the part of her that had never really left. At first, she painted for herself. Quietly, secretly. Each canvas was a conversation between her and her soul, a reclamation of the girl who once turned paper into whole worlds. But fear was never far. It hovered like a shadow. The fear of failure, of choosing art over security, of ending up with nothing. It was the same fear that had haunted her since childhood, when her family rationed groceries, when dreams were luxuries they simply couldn't afford. Even now, surrounded by colors and blank pages, insecurity clung to her. Still, Something deep within refused to surrender. She kept painting. Harold remained her rock, her cheerleader and quiet mentor. He invited friends to see her work, spoke of her talent to anyone who would listen. Her first sale came from Harold's niece, a soft, warm portrait of her newborn son. The price was small, but the validation was enormous. Someone had paid for her art. More commissions followed. With the severance money and careful savings, she began to support herself and reinvest in her work. Her confidence grew. She insisted on paying Harold rent, though he resisted. The studio, Eleanor's sanctuary, was alive again. Malene honored it, nurtured it. In 6 months, she had a small, loyal clientele. She branched into children's book illustrations, painted murals in cozy local cafes, built a modest online portfolio. Demand rose. Eventually, she hired a part-time assistant to manage logistics. She restored the studio, fresh paint, new lighting, shelves reorganized, but kept Eleanor's spirit intact. On a special shelf, she placed a photo she'd found. Eleanor, mid-laugh, paintbrushes in hand, joy splattered across her face. 2 years after losing her corporate job, Malene was living solely from her art. And for the first time in her life, she felt whole. Her name began circulating in the regional art scene. Then came a call she could hardly believe. A publishing house wanted to offer her a major contract to illustrate an entire children's book series. As her world shifted once again, Malene worked on something deeply personal. She had found an old yellowed photograph tucked into the back of a drawer. A young Harold and Eleanor, smiling by a lake, hands entwined. Malene studied it, their faces, their eyes, the unmistakable tenderness between them. And then she imagined a world where they had grown old together. She painted